The year is 1586. Greenwich Palace, a sprawling testament to Tudor power and wealth, stands sentinel on the banks of the River Thames. Within its walls, amidst the intricate tapestries, polished oak furniture, and the soft glow of candlelight, Queen Elizabeth I finds herself besieged not by foreign armies, but by the insidious tendrils of conspiracy and the gnawing weight of responsibility. The air in her privy chamber is thick with unspoken anxieties, a palpable tension that hums beneath the surface of courtly decorum. Reports from Francis Walsingham, her shrewd and ever-vigilant spymaster, have become increasingly frantic, each dispatch painting a darker picture of the machinations against her throne. Elizabeth, a woman forged in the crucible of political intrigue and religious conflict, stands at the heart of this storm. She is a figure of undeniable presence, her fiery red hair a stark contrast to the pale, almost translucent skin that speaks of long hours spent poring over state papers. Her gaze, sharp and intelligent, misses nothing. Years of navigating the treacherous waters of the English court have honed her instincts, making her wary of flattery, and ever attuned to the subtle shifts in allegiance, yet even her formidable will is tested by the present crisis. The Babington plot, a conspiracy to assassinate Elizabeth and replace her with her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, has cast a long shadow over the realm. The details, meticulously uncovered by Walsingham's network of spies, are chilling. Letters, secretly exchanged between Mary and her supporters, reveal a network of Catholic sympathizers determined to overthrow the Protestant Queen and restore England to the fold of Rome. Each intercepted message, each coded phrase deciphered, adds fuel to the fire of fear and suspicion that is consuming the court. Surrounding Elizabeth are her most trusted advisors, a carefully chosen circle of men whose loyalty and counsel she has relied upon for decades. William Cecil, Lord Burghley, the Queen's principal secretary, stands at her right hand, his face etched with concern. Burghley, a man of unwavering pragmatism, urges decisive action. He sees Mary as a viper in England's bosom, a constant threat to the stability of the realm. He believes that only her execution can truly secure Elizabeth's throne and ensure the safety of her Protestant subjects. On Elizabeth's left stands Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, a childhood friend and longtime favorite. His handsome features are marred by a deep anxiety, his usual charm replaced by a nervous energy. Leicester, a man of ambition and personal loyalty to the Queen, is torn between his affection for Elizabeth and his fear of the consequences that Mary's execution would unleash. He understands the international implications, the potential for war with Spain and France, both staunchly Catholic powers who would undoubtedly view Mary's death as an act of outrageous aggression. He urges caution, suggesting that perhaps a less drastic solution can be found, one that would neutralize Mary's threat without resorting to the ultimate act of regicide. Further back, but no less influential, stands Sir Francis Walsingham, the master of espionage. His dark eyes, constantly scanning the room, betray the weight of the secrets he carries. Walsingham is a man consumed by his duty to protect the Queen. He is convinced that Mary is the focal point of all Catholic conspiracies against Elizabeth. A magnet for rebellion and intrigue, he presents the intercepted letters as irrefutable evidence of Mary's guilt, arguing that Elizabeth can no longer afford to ignore the danger she poses. He is relentless in his pursuit of evidence, uncovering every detail of the plot, every name involved, every hidden motive. The atmosphere in the Privy Chamber is further charged by the presence of other courtiers, each vying for the Queen's attention, each offering their own opinion on the matter. Some advocate for leniency, citing Mary's royal blood and the potential for diplomatic backlash. Others demand swift justice, arguing that any sign of weakness will only embolden Elizabeth's enemies. The room becomes a battleground of competing ideologies, a microcosm of the religious and political divisions that plague the nation. Elizabeth listens intently to each argument, weighing the risks and benefits of every course of action. She is a master of political maneuvering, skilled at playing different factions against each other to achieve her own ends. But in this instance, the decision before her is fraught with peril. To execute a fellow queen, a woman of royal lineage, would be an unprecedented act, one that would send shockwaves throughout Europe and forever stain her reputation. Yet, to allow Mary to live to continue to be a rallying point for Catholic dissent would be to gamble with the security of her throne and the lives of her subjects. The opulence of Greenwich Palace serves as a stark contrast to the growing sense of dread that permeates the air. The gilded ceilings, the velvet curtains, the priceless works of art all speak of England's prosperity and power. But beneath the veneer of splendor lies a deep-seated insecurity, a fear of invasion, rebellion, and religious upheaval. Elizabeth is acutely aware of the fragility of her position, the constant threat posed by her enemies, both foreign and domestic. As she reads through the captured letters, the words swim before her eyes. The blatant treachery, the cold-blooded calculation, the unwavering determination to see her overthrown all, are a direct challenge to her authority, a personal affront to her dignity. Yet, even as anger rises within her, she cannot escape the nagging feeling of unease. Mary is not just a political rival, she is also her cousin, a member of her own family. They share a common ancestor in Henry VII, the founder of the Tudor dynasty. This shared bloodline creates a complex web of obligation and resentment, a sense of kinship that Elizabeth cannot entirely ignore. The intellectual debates about religion and legitimacy further complicate the matter. Elizabeth is a staunch Protestant, firmly committed to the Church of England, which her father, Henry VIII, established after breaking with Rome. She believes that the Pope's authority is illegitimate, and that every individual has the right to worship God according to their own conscience. Mary, on the other hand, is a devout Catholic, who sees the Pope as the supreme head of the Church. She believes that Elizabeth's claim to the throne is invalid because Henry VIII's marriage to Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth's mother, was never recognized by the Catholic Church. These religious differences are not merely theological, they are deeply intertwined with political power. Mary represents the Catholic alternative to Elizabeth, the hope for those who yearn for a return to the old faith. Her very existence is a challenge to Elizabeth's legitimacy, a constant reminder of the religious divisions that threaten to tear England apart. The complex family ties between Elizabeth and Mary only add to the burden on Elizabeth's shoulders. She is forced to consider not only the political implications of her decision, but also the personal cost. To execute Mary would be to condemn a member of her own family, to sever the ties of blood that bind them together. It would be an act of profound cruelty, one that would haunt her conscience for the rest of her days. Elizabeth pauses, her brow furrowed in thought. The weight of England rests on her shoulders, a crushing burden that threatens to overwhelm her. She glances around the room, her gaze lingering on each of her advisors, searching for guidance, for reassurance, for a way out of this impossible dilemma. But she knows that ultimately, the decision rests with her alone. She is the Queen of England, and she must do what is best for her country, even if it means sacrificing her own personal feelings. She picks up the captured letter once more, her eyes scanning the incriminating words. The weight of England rests on her shoulders. To understand the full story of how this letter changes history, subscribe to our channel and hit the like button to support more historical dramas. The camera focuses on the royal seal of the letter, the symbol of Elizabeth's power and authority, before cutting away, leaving the viewer to ponder the momentous decision that lies ahead. The room remains silent, the only sound the gentle crackling of the fire in the hearth, a subtle reminder of the volatile forces at play within the heart of the English court. The future of England, and perhaps the fate of two queens, hangs in the balance. Elizabeth rises from her chair and walks towards the window. She looks out at the Thames, the river flowing steadily towards the sea. It has always been a source of comfort for her, a reminder of the enduring strength and resilience of England. As she stares out at the water, she knows that she must find a way to navigate these treacherous currents, to steer her country safely through the storm. The decision she must make will not be easy, but she will face it with courage and determination, for the sake of her throne, her people, and her legacy. The candlelight flickers, casting long shadows across the room, as Elizabeth steels herself for the difficult days ahead. The fate of Mary, Queen of Scots, and the future of England lie in her hands. The room feels colder now, more claustrophobic, as if the very walls are closing in on her. She knows that she cannot delay any longer. A decision must be made. The suspense hangs heavy in the air, an invisible weight pressing down on everyone present. Elizabeth takes a deep breath, squares her shoulders, and turns back to face her advisors. The game, as they say, is afoot, and the stakes have never been higher. The intercepted letters, sealed with Mary's personal cipher and implicating her in the Babington plot, lay spread across the long table in Elizabeth's private study. The candlelight flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock the gravity of the situation. The air, once thick with anticipation of progress for England, became heavy with the stench of treason and the suffocating weight of inescapable choices. Elizabeth circled the table, her fingers tracing the delicate loops of the incriminating script. Each word was a hammer blow against the already fragile peace of mind she had fought so hard to maintain. Walsingham, ever vigilant, had presented the evidence with an almost unsettling triumph. He believed he had finally cornered the viper that threatened to strike at the heart of England. He detailed the network of Catholic conspirators, their coded messages, and their unwavering devotion to Mary's claim to the throne. He argued with uncharacteristic vehemence that Mary's mere existence was an invitation to rebellion, a rallying cry for those who sought to return England to the dominion of Rome. His voice, usually a low, persuasive murmur, now rang with the urgency of a man convinced that the fate of the kingdom hung in the balance. Elizabeth listened, her expression unreadable, but inwardly she was a tempest. The evidence was damning, undeniable, yet she hesitated. To condemn Mary was to condemn a queen, a woman of royal blood, her own cousin. It was to invite the wrath of Catholic Europe, to plunge England into a war that would test its very survival. It also meant confronting her own mortality. Mary's claim, after all, was rooted in Elizabeth's unmarried status, a constant reminder of the fragility of her reign and the uncertain future of the Tudor dynasty. The council, predictably, was divided. Burghley, the ever-pragmatic Lord Treasurer, argued forcefully for Mary's immediate execution. He painted a grim picture of England besieged by enemies, both foreign and domestic, and insisted that Mary was the focal point of all their machinations. He spoke of the need for decisive action, of the imperative to protect the Queen and the realm at all costs. Others, like the Earl of Leicester, urged caution, warning of the potential for international backlash and the moral implications of executing a fellow sovereign. He suggested exploring other options, such as stricter confinement or banishment, but his voice was drowned out by the chorus of those who demanded blood. Elizabeth found herself caught in a web of conflicting advice, each strand pulling her in a different direction. She retreated into her own thoughts, seeking solace in the familiar routines of governance. But even the most mundane tasks were tainted by the shadow of Mary's looming fate. She pored over diplomatic dispatches, searching for a way to appease the Catholic powers, to diffuse the growing tensions, but found only further evidence of their unwavering support for Mary. She consulted with theologians, seeking guidance on the moral implications of regicide, but received only ambiguous answers, further fueling her inner turmoil. Sleep offered no escape. Elizabeth was plagued by nightmares in which Mary appeared as a spectral figure, accusing her of betrayal and prophesying the downfall of England. She saw the faces of her ancestors, Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, each whispering judgments on her indecision. She would wake in a cold sweat, her heart pounding, the weight of her crown pressing down on her like a physical burden. Driven to distraction, Elizabeth sought refuge in the gardens of Greenwich Palace. The roses in full bloom offered a fleeting moment of beauty, but even their fragrance seemed tinged with the scent of decay. She wandered aimlessly through the manicured lawns, her thoughts swirling like the autumn leaves that had already begun to fall. Suddenly she stopped, noticing a small, withered branch lying on the path. She bent down and picked it up, examining it closely. It was broken, lifeless, a symbol of the fragility of existence. She thought of Mary, imprisoned in Fotheringhay Castle, her spirit slowly withering under the weight of her captivity. She wondered if there was any way to salvage the situation, to find a solution that would not involve bloodshed. She summoned Davison, her secretary, a man known for his meticulousness and unwavering loyalty. She entrusted him with the warrant for Mary's execution, but gave him no explicit instructions to enact it. She spoke vaguely of needing time to consider the matter further, of wanting to explore all possible avenues for a peaceful resolution. She sensed his confusion, his unspoken disapproval, but she brushed it aside. She needed someone she could trust, someone who would understand the delicate balance she was trying to maintain. But the warrant, now in Davison's possession, felt like a ticking time bomb. Elizabeth knew that it would only be a matter of time before someone seized upon it, before events spiraled out of her control. She had unleashed a force that she could no longer contain, a force that threatened to consume her, her kingdom, and her very soul. The pressure mounted. Ambassadors from France and Spain delivered veiled threats, warning of dire consequences if Mary were harmed. English Catholics, emboldened by the prospect of Mary's ascension, became increasingly defiant, openly celebrating her claim to the throne. Rumors of plots and conspiracies swirled through the court, creating an atmosphere of paranoia and suspicion. Elizabeth found herself increasingly isolated, unable to trust even her closest advisors. Burghley, growing increasingly impatient with Elizabeth's indecision, began to take matters into his own hands. He secretly consulted with members of the Privy Council, urging them to support the immediate execution of Mary. He argued that Elizabeth was being swayed by sentimentality, that she was putting her personal feelings ahead of the safety of the kingdom. He portrayed Mary as a relentless enemy, a viper who would stop at nothing to seize the throne. Elizabeth, sensing the growing undercurrent of dissent, summoned Burghley to her private chambers. She confronted him with the rumors of his clandestine meetings, demanding to know the truth. Burghley, ever the skilled politician, denied any wrongdoing, but Elizabeth saw the guilt in his eyes. She knew that he was plotting against her, that he was trying to force her hand. She dismissed him with a cold formality, her heart filled with a mixture of anger and betrayal. She realized that she was surrounded by enemies both within and without, and that her power was slipping away. The crown, once a symbol of strength and authority, now felt like a cage, trapping her in a prison of her own making. She paced the floor, her mind racing, desperate to find a way out of the trap that was closing in around her. She considered fleeing the country, abdicating the throne, but she knew that it was too late. She was the Queen of England, and she could not abandon her people, even if it meant sacrificing her own life. Suddenly, a new thought occurred to her, a desperate gamble that might just save her kingdom. She summoned Walsingham, the master of espionage, the man who knew more about the secrets of England than anyone else. She tasked him with finding a way to discredit Mary, to expose her as a traitor and a conspirator without resorting to execution. She hoped that by undermining Mary's reputation, she could neutralize the threat she posed without incurring the wrath of Catholic Europe. Walsingham, always resourceful, readily accepted the challenge. He dispatched his agents throughout England and Europe, searching for evidence of Mary's treachery. He bribed informants, intercepted letters, and spread rumors, all in an effort to blacken Mary's name. But time was running out. The pressure from the council was becoming unbearable, and the threats from abroad were growing more menacing. Elizabeth knew that she could not delay her decision much longer. She had to choose between saving her own life and saving her kingdom, between upholding the law and succumbing to political necessity. One evening, as she sat alone in her study staring at the warrant for Mary's execution, a wave of exhaustion washed over her. She felt as though she had been fighting a losing battle for years, and that she could no longer resist the inevitable. She picked up the quill, her hand trembling, and slowly began to write her name. But then she hesitated. She looked at the warrant again, at the words that would condemn her cousin to death, and she could not bring herself to sign it. She threw the quill down on the table, sending ink splattering across the parchment. She buried her face in her hands and wept. She wept for Mary, for herself, and for the kingdom she was sworn to protect. She knew that whatever decision she made, it would haunt her for the rest of her days. Days turned into weeks, and still Elizabeth could not bring herself to sign the warrant. She became increasingly withdrawn, refusing to see visitors and neglecting her duties. She spent hours alone in her private chapel, praying for guidance, but received no answer. Meanwhile, Burghley and the other members of the Privy Council grew increasingly frustrated with Elizabeth's inaction. They feared that she was losing her grip on reality, that she was allowing her personal feelings to cloud her judgment. They decided that they could no longer wait for her to make a decision, that they had to take matters into their own hands. Without Elizabeth's knowledge or consent, they secretly arranged for the warrant to be delivered to Fotheringhay Castle. They instructed the sheriff to carry out the execution immediately, without waiting for further orders. They knew that they were risking their lives, but they believed that they were acting in the best interests of the kingdom. The warrant was delivered to Fotheringhay Castle on a cold grey morning. Mary, who had been expecting it for weeks, received the news with a mixture of resignation and defiance. She spent her final hours in prayer, preparing herself for the inevitable. On the morning of February 8, 1587, Mary, Queen of Scots, was led to the executioner's block. She was dressed in a simple black gown, and her face was pale but composed. She spoke to the assembled crowd, declaring her innocence and forgiving her executioners. With a single stroke, the executioner brought down his axe, severing Mary's head from her body. A gasp went through the crowd, and then silence. Mary, Queen of Scots, was dead. The news of Mary's execution spread like wildfire throughout England and Europe. Catholics were outraged and Protestants rejoiced. Elizabeth, however, was horrified. She had not authorized the execution, and she was furious that her advisors had acted without her consent. She summoned Burghley and the other members of the Privy Council to her presence. She raged at them, accusing them of treason and insubordination. She demanded to know who had authorized the execution, but no one would confess. Elizabeth knew that she had to punish someone for Mary's death, both to appease the Catholic powers and to maintain her own authority. She chose Davison, her secretary, as the scapegoat. She accused him of betraying her trust and of exceeding his authority. She had him arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London. Davison, however, protested his innocence. He claimed that he had only acted on Elizabeth's orders, that she had given him the warrant and told him to keep it until she decided what to do. He insisted that he had never been instructed to carry out the execution. Elizabeth refused to listen to his pleas. She was determined to make him pay for Mary's death, even if it meant sacrificing an innocent man. She knew that she was being unjust, but she believed that it was necessary for the good of the kingdom. Davison was eventually convicted of negligence and sentenced to imprisonment. He spent several years in the Tower of London before being released. He died a broken man, his reputation ruined, and his life shattered. Elizabeth, meanwhile, was left to grapple with the consequences of Mary's execution. She knew that she had made a terrible mistake, that she had unleashed a chain of events that would forever haunt her. She had hoped to protect her kingdom by sacrificing Mary, but she had only succeeded in unleashing a new wave of violence and hatred. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted, leaving England vulnerable and isolated. Lord Burghley, a man weathered by years of service and hardened by political necessity, stood in the Queen's outer chamber, the warrant for Mary's execution clutched in his hand like a sacred relic. The Queen's indecision had become a dangerous liability, a festering wound threatening to poison the entire kingdom. Each day that passed emboldened the Catholic factions, fueled the whispers of rebellion, and strengthened the resolve of foreign adversaries. Elizabeth, trapped in her labyrinth of moral qualms and political calculations, seemed incapable of decisive action. Burghley, seeing the ship of state drifting towards the rocks, resolved to take the helm himself. He summoned Davison, the Queen's secretary, a man known for his meticulousness and unwavering loyalty, but perhaps lacking in the steel required for such a grave undertaking. Burghley, with carefully chosen words and an air of grave urgency, impressed upon Davison the paramount importance of national security. He spoke of the Queen's unspoken wishes, her agonizing internal conflict, and the dire consequences of further delay. He painted a vivid picture of England engulfed in flames, torn apart by religious strife and foreign invasion, all stemming from the continued existence of Mary Stuart. Davison, swayed by Burghley's impassioned plea and fearing for the stability of the realm, agreed to assist in the dispatch of the warrant. He understood the gravity of the act, the potential repercussions should the Queen disavow it, but he convinced himself that it was a necessary evil, a bitter medicine to cure a deadly disease. He retrieved the warrant from its secure location, and under Burghley's watchful eye, prepared it for delivery. A messenger, a man of unwavering discretion and proven reliability, was chosen for the task. He was given strict instructions to proceed with utmost haste, and to deliver the warrant directly to the authorities at Fotheringhay Castle, where Mary was held captive. Burghley ensured that the necessary letters of authorization were in order, bypassing the usual channels of royal oversight, relying instead on the urgency of the situation and the tacit understanding of key officials. The messenger, mounted on a swift horse, set off under the cover of darkness. The warrant safely concealed within a sealed pouch, he rode through the night, the fate of 2 queens and the future of England resting upon his shoulders. Every mile devoured brought him closer to Fotheringhay and closer to the precipice of irreversible action. At Fotheringhay Castle, Sir Amias Paulet, Mary's custodian, a man of staunch Protestant conviction and unwavering loyalty to Elizabeth, received the unexpected dispatch with a mixture of trepidation and grim satisfaction. He had long believed that Mary posed an intolerable threat to the Queen and the Protestant faith, and he had repeatedly urged Elizabeth to take decisive action. Now it seemed his prayers had been answered. Paulet, after carefully examining the warrant and confirming its authenticity, summoned the necessary officials and made preparations for the execution. He informed Mary of her impending fate with a cold and detached demeanor, offering her the services of a Protestant chaplain, which she vehemently refused. Mary, Queen of Scots, received the news of her execution with surprising composure. She had long anticipated this moment, having lived under the shadow of death for years. She saw herself as a martyr for the Catholic faith, a queen unjustly persecuted by a heretical regime, she spent her final hours in prayer preparing her soul for its final journey. On the morning of February 8, 1587, Mary was led from her chambers to the great hall of Fotheringhay Castle, which had been transformed into a makeshift execution chamber. She walked with dignity and grace, her head held high, showing no sign of fear or regret. A small crowd of onlookers had gathered, their faces a mixture of curiosity, apprehension, and morbid fascination. As Mary approached the scaffold, she was met by the executioner, a burly man whose face was hidden behind a mask. She calmly removed her outer garments, revealing a crimson underskirt, the color of martyrdom. She knelt before the block and, after offering a final prayer, placed her head upon it. The executioner raised his axe and, with a swift and decisive blow, severed Mary's head from her body. A gasp rippled through the assembled crowd as the executioner held aloft the severed head, proclaiming, "God save Queen Elizabeth." News of Mary's execution traveled swiftly, reaching Elizabeth at Greenwich Palace several days later. The Queen, initially stunned into silence, erupted in a torrent of rage and disbelief. She had not explicitly ordered the execution, nor had she given her direct authorization. She had merely signed the warrant, intending to use it as a bargaining chip, a means of pressuring Mary into renouncing her claim to the English throne. She had never anticipated that her advisors would act so swiftly and decisively, without her explicit command. Elizabeth summoned Burghley and Davison to her presence, her face contorted with fury. She accused them of treason, of exceeding their authority, and of deliberately defying her wishes. She railed against their audacity, their lack of respect for her royal prerogative, and the grave political consequences of their actions. Burghley, standing firm in the face of the Queen's wrath, defended his actions with unwavering conviction. He argued that he had acted in the best interests of the realm, that Mary's continued existence posed an intolerable threat to national security, and that the execution was a necessary evil to safeguard the Protestant faith. He acknowledged that he had acted without the Queen's explicit command, but he insisted that he had acted in accordance with her implicit wishes, as deduced from her repeated expressions of concern about Mary's activities. Davison, on the other hand, crumbled under the weight of the Queen's anger and the enormity of his own role in the affair. He confessed to his part in the dispatch of the warrant, but he insisted that he had acted under the instructions of Burghley and in the belief that he was serving the Queen's best interests. He pleaded for mercy, begging the Queen to understand that he had been motivated by loyalty and patriotism. Elizabeth, however, was unmoved by their pleas. She needed a scapegoat, someone to bear the brunt of the blame for the unauthorized execution. She could not afford to be seen as complicit in the death of a fellow queen, a distant relative, and a figure of international renown. The Catholic powers of Europe would be outraged, and her own subjects would be divided. Davison was arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London, accused of dereliction of duty and abuse of authority. He was later brought to trial and convicted, stripped of his office and sentenced to a hefty fine. Burghley, despite his central role in the affair, escaped relatively unscathed, his long and loyal service to the crown outweighing his transgression. Elizabeth, in a carefully orchestrated display of grief and outrage, publicly mourned the death of Mary, Queen of Scots. She wore black, ordered memorial services, and dispatched ambassadors to foreign courts to express her sorrow and to disavow any direct responsibility for the execution. She claimed that she had been betrayed by her advisors, that the execution had been carried out without her knowledge or consent, and that she was deeply saddened by the loss of her cousin and fellow queen. The Queen's performance was masterful, a calculated exercise in damage control designed to appease her critics and to maintain her grip on power. But beneath the veneer of grief and regret, there lay a deep sense of unease. Elizabeth knew that she could not entirely escape responsibility for Mary's death. She had signed the warrant, knowing full well the potential consequences. She had allowed the situation to fester, creating an atmosphere of urgency and paranoia that had ultimately led to the unauthorized execution. The execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, sent shockwaves throughout Europe. Catholic powers, particularly Spain and France, condemned the act as a barbaric outrage and vowed to avenge Mary's death. Pope Sixtus V threatened to excommunicate Elizabeth and called for a crusade to overthrow her heretical regime. Philip II of Spain, already plotting an invasion of England, saw Mary's execution as the final justification for his long-awaited armada. He declared that he was acting as the avenger of Mary's death, and the defender of the Catholic faith, he assembled a massive fleet of warships, intending to sail to England, overthrow Elizabeth, and restore Catholicism to the throne. England braced itself for war. Elizabeth, facing the gravest threat of her reign, rallied her people to defend their country against the Spanish invaders. She mobilized the English fleet, fortified coastal defenses, and mustered an army to repel the anticipated invasion. The nation stood united against the common enemy, ready to fight for its independence and its Protestant faith. The Spanish Armada set sail in the summer of 1588, a formidable fleet of over 130 ships, carrying thousands of soldiers and tons of armaments. The Armada was intended to rendezvous with Spanish troops in the Netherlands and then invade England. The English fleet, though smaller and less heavily armed than the Spanish Armada, was faster, more maneuverable, and commanded by skilled and experienced sailors. The English ships harassed the Armada as it sailed up the English Channel, disrupting its formation and preventing it from landing troops on English soil. The decisive battle took place off the coast of Gravelines, where the English fleet launched a devastating attack on the Armada, using fireships to set several Spanish vessels ablaze. The Armada, scattered and demoralized, was forced to retreat, sailing north around Scotland and Ireland. The Spanish Armada suffered heavy losses in the retreat, with many ships wrecked on the rocky coasts of Scotland and Ireland. Only a fraction of the Armada returned to Spain, a humiliating defeat for Philip II and a resounding victory for Elizabeth and England. The defeat of the Spanish Armada marked a turning point in English history. England emerged as a major naval power, its independence secured and its Protestant faith preserved. Elizabeth's reign reached its zenith as she became a symbol of national pride and defiance against foreign aggression. However, the shadow of Mary, Queen of Scots, continued to haunt Elizabeth. The execution, however indirectly authorized, had left an indelible stain on her reign. She could never entirely escape the moral and political consequences of her decision. She had secured her throne and saved her country, but at a terrible price. The weight of that price would remain with her until the end of her days. The political machinery she had set in motion had trapped Mary, but it had also ensnared Elizabeth, binding her to a legacy of ruthlessness as well as resolve. The trap had sprung shut, leaving no room for retreat, only the cold, hard reality of consequence. Elizabeth, upon hearing of Mary's beheading at Fotheringhay, erupted in a calculated storm of fury. The news, delivered by a trembling messenger, struck the carefully constructed equilibrium of her court like a rogue cannonball. Her face, normally an impassive mask of regal control, contorted in what appeared to be genuine, unadulterated rage. The carefully cultivated image of a benevolent, divinely ordained monarch was for a moment shattered, revealing the shrewd and politically calculating woman beneath. She summoned her Privy Council, a collection of men who had served her loyally for decades, their faces etched with the anxieties of governing a nation constantly teetering on the brink of war and religious upheaval. William Cecil, Lord Burghley, her most trusted advisor, and the architect of England's security, stood amongst them, his usually impassive countenance betraying a hint of trepidation. He knew he had acted without her explicit instruction, a dangerous gamble even for a man of his stature and influence. Elizabeth unleashed her fury upon them, accusing them of treason, insubordination, and a blatant disregard for her authority. Her voice, usually measured and controlled, rose in pitch, echoing through the hallowed halls of Greenwich Palace. She accused them of rushing to judgment, of exceeding their authority, and of placing her kingdom in grave danger. She claimed she had been deliberately misled, her intentions misinterpreted, and her authority usurped. The councillors, seasoned politicians accustomed to navigating the treacherous currents of courtly life, stood their ground, offering justifications for their actions. They argued that the evidence against Mary was irrefutable, the threat she posed to England existential. They pointed to the numerous plots and conspiracies that had threatened Elizabeth's life and throne, all orchestrated or supported by Mary. They insisted that they had acted in the best interests of the realm, driven by a desperate desire to protect their queen and their country from the looming threat of Catholic domination. Burghley, ever the pragmatist, argued that the execution of Mary was a necessary evil, a painful but ultimately essential step in securing England's future. He maintained that Mary's continued existence represented an intolerable risk, a constant source of inspiration and support for Catholic rebels and foreign powers seeking to overthrow Elizabeth. He reminded the Queen of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, a stark reminder of the religious violence that plagued Europe and the dangers of allowing religious divisions to fester. Elizabeth listened to their arguments, her expression unreadable. She understood the logic behind their actions, the political realities that had driven them to such a drastic measure. But she also recognized the potential consequences of their actions, the outrage from Catholic powers, the threat of invasion, and the damage to her reputation as a just and merciful ruler. She knew that she had to manage the situation carefully, to distance herself from the execution while simultaneously demonstrating her strength and resolve. She had to appease her allies, placate her enemies, and maintain the loyalty of her subjects. It was a delicate balancing act, one that required all of her considerable political skill and cunning. To demonstrate her displeasure, Elizabeth turned her wrath upon William Davison, her Secretary of State, the man she had entrusted with the death warrant. Davison, a relatively minor figure in the court, had been caught in the crossfire of the power struggle between Elizabeth and her counselors. He had, perhaps naively, followed the instructions of the council, believing that he was acting in accordance with the Queen's wishes. Elizabeth accused Davison of negligence, incompetence, and disobedience. She claimed that she had never explicitly instructed him to dispatch the warrant, that she had only entrusted it to him for safekeeping. She had hoped, she said, to find another solution, a way to neutralize Mary's threat without resorting to bloodshed. Davison, overwhelmed by the accusations and the gravity of the situation, protested his innocence, pleading with the Queen for mercy. He insisted that he had acted in good faith, believing that he was fulfilling her implicit instructions. But Elizabeth remained unmoved, determined to make him a scapegoat for the execution. Davison was arrested, imprisoned in the Tower of London, and eventually brought to trial. He was found guilty of dereliction of duty and sentenced to a hefty fine and imprisonment. Although he was eventually released, his career was ruined, his reputation tarnished beyond repair. He became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of serving a queen who was as unpredictable as she was powerful. Elizabeth also attempted to deflect blame by orchestrating a public display of mourning for Mary. She ordered the court to wear black, and she shed crocodile tears for her cousin, claiming that she had always hoped for a peaceful resolution to their conflict. She insisted that she had been deeply saddened by Mary's death, and that she had never intended for her to be executed. This performance was met with skepticism, both at home and abroad. Many believed that Elizabeth was simply trying to cover her tracks, to protect herself from the political fallout of Mary's execution. But Elizabeth was a master of political theater, and she managed to convince enough people that she was genuinely grieved by Mary's death. The execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, sent shockwaves throughout Europe. Catholic powers, particularly Spain and France, were outraged by the execution of a fellow sovereign and a devout Catholic. They condemned Elizabeth as a tyrant and a heretic, and they vowed to avenge Mary's death. Philip II of Spain, the most powerful monarch in Europe, saw Mary's execution as a personal affront. He had long considered himself the champion of Catholicism, and he viewed Elizabeth as a dangerous enemy. He had been planning to invade England for years, and Mary's execution provided him with the perfect pretext. Philip began to assemble a massive fleet of warships, known as the Spanish Armada, with the intention of invading England and overthrowing Elizabeth. The Armada was the largest and most powerful fleet ever assembled, and it posed a grave threat to England's security. Elizabeth, however, was not intimidated. She rallied her people, calling on them to defend their country against the Spanish invaders. She appointed capable commanders to lead her navy and her army, and she prepared England for war. The English navy, though smaller than the Spanish Armada, was more maneuverable and better equipped. The English ships were armed with long-range cannons, which allowed them to bombard the Spanish ships from a distance. The English sailors were also more experienced and better trained than their Spanish counterparts. In the summer of 1588, the Spanish Armada sailed towards England. The English navy engaged the Armada in a series of battles in the English Channel. The English ships used their superior maneuverability and firepower to inflict heavy damage on the Spanish ships. The Armada was eventually defeated by the English navy with the help of a fierce storm that scattered the Spanish ships. The defeat of the Spanish Armada was a major turning point in European history. It marked the beginning of the decline of Spanish power and the rise of England as a major world power. Elizabeth's victory over the Spanish Armada solidified her position as a powerful and respected monarch. She had successfully defended her country against the most powerful empire in the world, and she had cemented her legacy as one of the greatest rulers in English history. However, the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, continued to haunt Elizabeth. She never fully recovered from the event, and she often spoke of it with regret. She realized that she had made a difficult decision, one that had been necessary to protect her country, but one that had also come at a great personal cost. As Elizabeth grew older, she became increasingly introspective, reflecting on the choices she had made and the events that had shaped her reign. She realized that power was a heavy burden, and that leadership required making difficult decisions that often had unintended consequences. She understood that her legacy would be defined by her actions, both good and bad. She hoped that history would remember her as a strong and effective ruler, one who had defended her country against its enemies and brought prosperity to her people. But she also knew that she would be remembered for the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, an event that would forever stain her reign. In her final years, Elizabeth became increasingly isolated, surrounded by courtiers and advisors who vied for her attention and her favor. She grew distrustful of those around her, fearing that they were only interested in her power and her wealth. She found solace in her books and her studies, immersing herself in the works of ancient philosophers and historians. She sought to understand the nature of power, the complexities of human nature, and the meaning of life. As her health began to decline, Elizabeth became increasingly preoccupied with her mortality. She knew that her reign was coming to an end, and she worried about the future of her country. She had no heir, and she feared that her death would plunge England into chaos and civil war. On her deathbed, Elizabeth was asked to name her successor. She hesitated, reluctant to relinquish her power, even in death. Finally, she whispered the name of James VI of Scotland, Mary's son, the man who would unite the crowns of England and Scotland. Elizabeth died on March 24, 1603, at the age of 69. Her death marked the end of the Tudor dynasty and the beginning of a new era in English history. Her reign had been one of the most remarkable in English history, a period of great political, economic, and cultural achievement. She left behind a legacy of strong leadership, political stability, and cultural flourishing. She had defended her country against its enemies, promoted trade and industry, and fostered a golden age of English literature and art. But she also left behind a legacy of political intrigue, religious persecution, and the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. Her reign had been marked by violence and conflict, and she had made difficult decisions that had cost lives and caused suffering. In the end, Elizabeth's reign was a complex and contradictory one. She was a brilliant and charismatic leader, but she was also a ruthless and calculating politician. She was a defender of her country, but she was also a source of division and conflict. Her legacy continues to be debated and reinterpreted by historians and scholars. Some see her as a great queen who saved England from destruction and ushered in a golden age. Others see her as a tyrant who sacrificed her conscience and her humanity for the sake of power. Regardless of how she is viewed, Elizabeth I remains one of the most fascinating and influential figures in English history. Her reign shaped the course of English history, and her legacy continues to resonate today. After her death, James VI of Scotland ascended to the English throne, becoming James I of England. This marked the union of the crowns of England and Scotland, a significant event in British history. The two countries, though still distinct, were now ruled by the same monarch, paving the way for their eventual unification into the single kingdom of Great Britain. The immediate aftermath of Elizabeth's death saw a relatively smooth transition of power, despite the long-standing uncertainties surrounding the succession. James, though a foreigner to the English court, had been carefully cultivated as a potential heir, and his accession was generally accepted, albeit with some reservations from those who favored other claimants. The execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, continued to cast a long shadow over Anglo-Scottish relations even after James's accession. While James publicly accepted his mother's execution as a necessary act of state, it is believed that he harbored deep resentment towards Elizabeth and her advisors for their role in her death. This underlying tension would occasionally surface in Anglo-Scottish politics, though it never escalated into open conflict. The reign of James I marked a new chapter in English history, one characterized by different priorities and challenges. While Elizabeth had focused on maintaining religious stability and defending England against foreign threats, James faced new issues, such as the growing tensions between the Crown and Parliament and the increasing influence of Puritanism within English society. The memory of Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, continued to be celebrated and romanticized in English culture. She became a symbol of national pride, independence, and cultural achievement. Her image was invoked during times of crisis, and her legacy was used to inspire future generations of English leaders. The execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, remained a controversial topic, debated by historians and scholars for centuries to come. Some argued that it was a necessary act of self-defense, essential for the survival of England and the Protestant cause. Others condemned it as an act of treachery and injustice, a stain on Elizabeth's reign and a violation of the principles of sovereignty and kinship. The debate over Mary's execution continues to this day, reflecting the enduring complexities and ambiguities of history. There is no easy answer, no simple explanation for the events that led to her death. It was a product of its time, a reflection of the political, religious, and social forces that shaped the world in which Elizabeth and Mary lived. The final silence.